afternoon from San Diego.
Okay.
I'd like to welcome everybody to our final Vedanta online class, where we've talked about philosophy, practices, and experiences. Today is one of these bonus classes where we are going to address the questions that we were not able to ask, and we've got a panel of experts to be able to answer them. So today we're going to have a little bit of fun, and it'll be lots of discussion. And I'm going to do something different today. I'd like to start off by, we begin every session, we'll begin with the chant. I'd like to have our senior Swami, Swamis Atmarupananda, help us today by beginning with the chant. Swami, let's unmute you.
Unmuted.
All right, Swami.
Okay,
Swami
ready?
Atmarupananda, would you please begin this session by a chant?
Okay, and this is a traditional chant, a very popular and common chant for the welfare of all, which is very much needed at this present time. Om Sarvastaratu Durgani Sarvo Bhadrani Pashyatu Sarva Sadbuddhim Apnotu Sarva Sarvatra Nandatu. May all beings cross over the difficulties of life. May all see that which is noble and uplifting. May all attain to right understanding. May all beings everywhere rejoice. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. Om peace, peace, peace be unto us all.
Thank you, Swamiji. And thank you everyone for coming and attending today's final session. We have a wonderful group of Swamis and Pravrajikas who are going to be with us today. And for those that have gone through the whole course, which most of you have, it's been a very enriching, enlivening, and really in-depth course. And so we're just thankful to the Swamis who've given us these beautiful presentations and have really enlivened our spiritual life during this COVID-19 experience. I want to make two announcements before we begin, because sometimes at the end, I know people have to leave. One is that tomorrow you'll receive two things. One is you're going to receive is an evaluation about this course. And we'd love your feedback, your suggestions. And we want to also, people are asking, what next? What next? We're going to take a little break, and then we're going to resume this in the fall in a more structured way with more structured courses. And we're just sort of brainstorming about the opportunities that we're going to do in the fall. So we'd love your input in all of this before we begin this process. So you'll receive one email, which will be a survey, an evaluation about things you like, things you didn't like. We'd love your honest feedback. The second thing is that we're going to send you another email regarding, we would love to have you share your experiences. You know, we've had in this process a death and dying retreat. We've had the spiritual journey. If you remember, we began this retreat talking about the spiritual journey, about how you're going to transform in this by listening to these talks, by practicing these practices. How will you transform at the end of this COVID-19 experience? We would love to hear about your transformation, if there was any at all. We want to share. And so there is a devotee, Rita Matthews, who's so lovingly, this was her idea. And we'd love to collect your experiences about how this course, if it has helped you, how you've transformed, maybe by doing the practices, the difficulties that have arisen during this COVID-19 experiences, and the things you did about this, especially regarding this class and the practices. And if you'd like to share that in a paragraph or two, in whatever length of a way, we're going to send you a second email regarding that. And what she's going to do is she's going to compile all of these experiences, put them together, and then we can share them with you. It's because spirituality is about transformation. And we want to see how you and others have transformed so we can share this and learn from another. So that's those 2 emails. Please try to give as much feedback as possible in these 2 emails. Now, I would just like to make a quick introduction just to make sure it's kind of a roll call to make sure all our speakers are here. So let's start from seniority wise. So we have Swamis Atmarupananda, who's from Vedanta side of Houston, and he gave the talk on personal transformation, the talk on Raja Yoga, and the talk on Bhakti Yoga. Thank you, Swamiji. And Karma Yoga, I'm sorry, Karma Yoga. Please excuse me, Karma Yoga. Okay, then we have Pravrajika, Vrajaprana. Pravrajika, can you say something so we know you're here?
I'm here.
Okay, good, all right, we see you. And Pravrajika Vrajaprana was our nun who started the whole thing off by giving the introduction to Vedanta. And she also, remember, gave us the beautiful reminiscences of various Swamis. So we thank you, Pravrajika Vrajaprana, for joining us today. Next, we have Swami Atmajnananda from Washington, D.C. Swamiji, can you just say hello so we can see your face?
Hello, everyone.
Thank you, Swamiji. Swamiji was the one who spoke on Bhakti Yoga, and we're just really happy to have him here from Washington, D.C. And next we have Swami Sarvapriyananda ji. If he's here, is he here? Swami Sarvapriyananda, can you say something?
Namaste, namaste everybody.
Oh, great.
Namaste.
He came, Swamiji is here from the Vedanta side of New York, and Swamiji spoke on Jnana Yoga. So we're so happy to have Swamiji here. And finally, also we have Swami Chidekananda from Kolkata, India. Swamiji, can you just say something to know that this is, you're here?
Pranam Swamiji, Pranam to all Swamiji.
Wonderful. So Swamiji is speaking from Kolkata, and as you remember, he spoke on yoga as a spiritual practice. So just to give you an idea, we have a group of what we call, to me, they're like the NASA experts. You remember in Apollo 13 when difficulties arose and we had to come to the experts to help us solve these problems. So just like that, in our spiritual life, the difficulties we're facing, maybe we're kind of like diverging from the path to all of ultimate reality. We're here to take basically any questions in regard to life experience and how to get us back in tune to that ultimate reality. And you have a panel of experts from all over the world to help us get back on track. And what I like to do is already I have a number of questions that have come up in emails. So we want to get to as many questions as possible. So what we're going to do in 2 ways, we'll call on you. And when we call on you, please give your name to Vikram. And Vikram is our host here. We'll communicate with Vikram, and he'll be in a queue. So just communicate with him. We'd like to have your video also present, and get to the point of the question. Not so much comments, just get straight to the point because we have a long queue of questions. And also, I think that is it. So let us begin. Let's just dive deep right into it here. So let's start, Vikram. Let's start with our first live question.
Swamiji, the first question will be from Mark, who's joining us from Trabuco. Mark, I am trying to unmute you, and you should be good to go. And yep, you're on, Mark. Please go ahead with your question, Mark.
Hi.
Hi, Mark. Before you begin, yeah. I forgot to do. If your question is specifically to a certain speaker, please address that question to the speaker. Otherwise, if your question is a general question, I'm going to just allow the speakers, whoever wants to answer that question, can answer that question. And also, if any of the other speakers want to add to that answer, please do so. And then when I feel that everybody's done, we'll go to the next question. Mark, you're on.
Thanks, Hari. Based on topics discussed, I guess it should be for Sarvapriyananda, but Atmarupananda is always first in my heart, so I wouldn't mind if he answered it too. It's a question about the relationship between Buddhism and Vedanta, and specifically Vedanta from the perspective of a jnani. So here goes. for years and years, about as long as I've been participating at Trabuco, I've also been sitting with several different Buddhist groups, mainly Theravadan. And whenever I've brought up the topic of the relationship between Buddhism and Vedanta, you know, being a devotee, trying to adhere to both as best I can, the Buddhist people have always drawn a stark contrast with Vedanta. But I think it's been a misplaced contrast because they usually talk about what we would consider to be bhakti. And they, you know, laughingly will call me a theist and so forth. But, you know, my feeling is especially consistent with what Sarvapriyananda talked about a few weeks ago. That really doesn't make sense because a jnani isn't expected in our tradition to even necessarily believe in God, although I do. And I think my sense is it's more a matter of terminology. And I think that, as lawyers might say, there's more of a distinction than a difference. So I'm just curious as to whether anyone on the panel with expertise, sufficient expertise, would let me know if they think I'm talking sense or if I'm off base and focusing on the parallels between the teachings of Lord Buddha and of our Vedantic scholars.
So would anybody like to address this question?
Should I jump in?
Yeah, jump in, go ahead.
Okay, Mark, thank you for your question. It's big, difficult, and highly contested topic. And there have been books and books on this and various points of view all hotly held on to. But let me just give you one particular angle into it, my personal experience from my perspective. I had this interesting experience over the last 8 months. I was at Harvard University, the Harvard Divinity School, and I saw that Professor Garfield, who is a world expert on Tibetan Buddhism, was offering a course on Madhyamaka, my favorite brand of Buddhism. So I thought I shouldn't miss, I've read his work earlier. I never thought I'd be able to attend his classes. In his course, I took 2 courses on Buddhism this time. So one was Indo-Tibetan Madhyamaka, and with Professor Garfield. Another was Introduction to Classical Indian Buddhism with Professor Parimal Patil. One in the Divinity School, one in the Philosophy Department. Okay. Now, before going into these courses, what was my conception of the differences and relationship between Buddhism and Advaita Vedanta? I limit myself to Advaita Vedanta. Yeah. And after these experiences at Harvard, how is it changed, or in what respect has it changed? This is what I'm going to say, and as briefly as possible. Before going in there, my idea was ultimately Advaita Vedanta and the peculiar synthesis of Vijnanavada and Madhyamaka Buddhism, which is the core philosophy of Tibetan Buddhism. They are saying the same thing. Immediately I'd qualify it by they're pointing towards the same thing. They're not necessarily saying the same thing because it can't be said. Often, to grossly oversimplify things, the main points of dispute are the existence of the self and the existence of God. But that's existence of God is also a variation on the subject of the existence of self.
Right.
So Atma, or the self. The way I looked at it before going in there was this, that ultimately both are trying to say the same thing in this way. There is a way of misunderstanding Advaita Vedanta and there's a way of misunderstanding Madhyamaka. The way of misunderstanding Madhyamaka Buddhism, Nagarjuna's Buddhism, is Shunyavada, what Professor Patil called the emptiness people, is that they are ultimately talking about nothing, that there is no reality at all, which is grossly unfair because starting with Nagarjuna and Chandrakirti and other great Madhyamaka philosophers, they have explicitly denied that they're talking about nothing. Emptiness is not nothing. That's a misunderstanding of Madhyamakas. So when they say anatma, they don't mean that there's nothing at all. On the other hand, there's a way of misunderstanding Advaita Vedanta, which is when you say Atma, Brahman, existence, consciousness, bliss, the intuitive feeling is that you're talking about something, some entity. Here is the world, and there is something called Brahman, which you have to realize. That's also not true. It's not an entity in addition to all other. There are a billion things in this world, and there's a billion and one thing called Brahman. No, not like that. It is the real nature of all these billion things. So how do you reconcile them? The way I put it was that it is no thing. It's not nothing, and it's not a thing. The ultimate reality is no thing. So that's something that should satisfy both the Advaitins and the Shunyavadins.
Yeah.
But that's what I thought. How did it get modified? So I'll wrap it up. After going through these courses, what happened was, see, when I entered Professor Garfield's course, the first thing he said was, Swami, keep your Vedanta out of this. What we're going to discuss. Keep your Atman, Brahman out of this. And it was so interesting that I ran into this Tibetan Lama on the streets of Cambridge, just outside Harvard Yard. I was walking back to campus, and this Lama comes and he looks at me. I look at him, and he says, what are you doing here? I said, what are you doing here? He said, I've got this school. I teach Tibetan Buddhism. And I said, I'm studying your Buddhism, the philosophy of Tibetan Buddhism. And he was very interested in knowing what books I'm studying. And then he said, you are an Advaitin. He said, you're a non-dualist. I said, yes. And he says, same thing, you know. Now look, here is a Tibetan practitioner who says it's the same thing. Here is the scholar who says it's absolutely not the same thing, and they are both right. This was my takeaway from my experience at Harvard, that they are both right in their own perspective. The Tibetan Lama said that, you know, that those 5 verses on enlightenment by Shankara, I said, Manisha Panchakam? Yeah, that one. I use it to teach Tibetan Buddhism. This Lama who's using Shankara's verses to teach Tibetan Buddhism.
I love it.
So what my take from the whole thing? The take is this, that I have modified my position to this extent that there are different paths pointing to that no thing, that's still there, but I realize how different the paths are. Yeah, they're really very different. Just one thing here, which I think Swami Atmarupananda is something that he told me. I think he can explain it better. I remember a few years ago at Belur Mutt, over a cup of coffee at the monks' quarters in Belur Mutt, we're talking about Tibetan Buddhism and Advaita Vedanta. And he said, you know, as you said just now, Mark, that they are very insistent on drawing a line between, differentiating between Vedanta and Buddhism. He said, you know, that the Tibetan Buddhists are quite uncompromising about this, that they're absolutely not the same thing at all. But you would find that there are flavors of Chinese Buddhism, Chinese Mahayana Buddhism, which are very Vedantic. An example would be the Mahaparinirvana Sutra, which is the source of the Tathagata Garbha doctrine, which is extraordinarily Vedantic. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Swami.
Thank you, Swamiji. Anybody else before we leave this question?
Wouldn't Atmarupanji want to?
Swami Atmarupananda, would you like to add anything?
Okay, I can say a little bit. And of course, I agree with everything that Swami Sarvapriyananda said. And so just to add a little bit to it, having done a lot of interreligious dialogue with different people, including many different Buddhists of different types, I found that generally the Buddhists are the most difficult people to do interreligious dialogue with exceptions. There are some. Again, I have Chinese Buddhist and Japanese Buddhist friends where we find agreement on most things. But especially those from the Tibetan tradition and the Theravada tradition, they take concepts and words extremely seriously. And they see them as billiard balls. There's no wiggle room. There's no stretching them. They are what they are. Their definitions are fixed. And so I've had many arguments with Buddhists of that variety, Tibetan or Theravada, where I try to explain to them that when we say self, as Swami Sarvapriyananda was explaining, when we say self, we don't mean a thing. And then I go on to explain that it is no thing, and amplify on that. And at the end of the explanation, they say, yes, but we don't accept the self. And so then I get, yes, but what I was saying was the self is not a thing. It means, and then explain how it can be no thing in the sense, in the sense that often shunyata is spoken of if you look at it experientially rather than philosophically. And still they'll come back to the point, well, that's okay, but we don't accept the self. And so that being tied to strict definitions and words is a great problem in dialogue with many Buddhists of the Tibetan tradition, especially the Gelugpas, those that belong to the tradition of the Dalai Lama. With those who belong to the Nyingma tradition and the Kagyu tradition, it's much easier to find points of agreement. And so finally, let me also say that and this was indicated by Swami Sarvapriyananda very well also, that philosophically they're going in opposite directions. And so to find a harmony philosophically is difficult. But for us as followers of Sri Ramakrishna and Vedanta, where the tendency is to look for similarity, where we'll find similarity is in experience. Because if the mind is the structure of the human being, physical and mental, is based on universal structures, universal psychological and physical structures, then experience, there must be similarities in experience. And so that's the place to look for similarities.
Thank you, Swamiji. Thank you, everyone. Let's go ahead and move on to our next question. The next question here is it's a question directed to Swami Atmajnananda, Washington, D.C. It's addressed by Meera. She says, recently, Sushant Rajput, a young, successful, self-made movie star from India, died by suicide. I am deeply affected that such a good-hearted person who's contributed to the welfare of others had to die. What advice do you give to those of us who are not directly connected to this person, but are deeply moved by this tragedy that appears to have been caused by depression and workplace pressure? How do we make sense of life and this tragic situation? Please don't suggest everything is an illusion. While this may be true, there are times when I find Advaita philosophy just annoying. Swami, would you like to tackle this?
Can I get an easier question?
We start off at the most difficult, then we work our way to the easier ones.
Yes. Well, how do we deal with any tragedy? I mean, this is one particular thing, but there's so many tragic events that take place in the world. The fact of the matter is that if we're compassionate people, we will suffer. If we look at the other side, if we want to have such dispassion, and it means a little bit of disconnection with people, and we want to protect ourselves so that we're not deeply affected by other things, then we're cutting off a little bit of the human aspect of our personality. I always point to Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother and Swamiji, the three of them in particular, how they reacted to death of their near and dear ones. We have three beautiful examples. Sri Ramakrishna is the most interesting. When his nephew died, Akshay, he was very, very, very attached to this nephew. He was a very wonderful young boy. His own father didn't want to have too much to do with him, and Thakur was almost like a guardian for him, loved him very much. And when he passed away, Thakur had two reactions. Immediately, he was laughing, that he saw that death is nothing but like the sword coming out of the sheath, that the soul doesn't die, that the body dies, nothing like that. Then the next day he said, but oh, when I remembered, Akshay, what happened? He always gave the example of his heart being wrung like a wet gumcha. Huh? that he felt such pain and everything, and then he realized that this is if I can feel that, how much more do people in the world experience that? Holy Mother, when Thakur died, she had no will to live. Even they had to take her on pilgrimage. They had to take her to Vrindavan and other places, and really, they say if she hadn't had several visions of Sri Ramakrishna that assured her that he was still present with her somehow, that she had no will to live whatsoever. When the direct disciples passed away, it was very painful for her. There's one beautiful incident when one devotee came and looked very sad. So the Holy Mother asked her what happened. She said, my child died, my son died. And she had everybody thought she'll say something that, oh, this is the way of life, everyone dies, that you have to move on, this and that. But she didn't say anything. She got very quiet. Then she started to cry herself. And I think, did I mention it last time? No. But anyhow, so, and Swamiji, when Goodwin died, that Swamiji was so upset, another beautiful quote, that somebody said to Swamiji, Goodwin, you all know, was the English disciple who followed Swamiji around everywhere and took all the notes in shorthand. All of the lectures we have, Jnana Yoga and others, are because of him. And he followed Swamiji to India, and in South India, he came down with some type of illness and very quickly passed away. So somebody said to Swamiji that perhaps it was the will of God that Goodwin died. And then Swamiji said, of course, I should have Vrajaprana tell this. He wrote a nice book about Goodwin. But anyhow, he said something like, if it was the will of God that my Goodwin should die, then is it not my right and duty to fight against such a God? Something like that. So I think that there's nothing wrong that we see tragedy, we see people die, even to see a stranger we know nothing about. We've had so many examples lately, that it should touch us. That we don't want to be such a Dvaitins that we say, no, I am the self, or I won't be affected by this or that. We all have a human heart, and we want to open up that heart. And if we want that, then we have to let ourselves open to suffering for the sake of others. But the suffering that we see, or the reaction in Thakuraman Swamiji, had no hint of selfishness to it. With us, there's a little bit of oh, what will I do now? And look at my loss and how I'll miss them. So there's a big difference there. But I would say that yes, it's a sign that we have a human heart. There's nothing wrong with it. That we see the death of a loved one, or even someone that we don't know personally, that if it affects us, at least we know that we're alive, that there's a human heart beating within us. So, of course, we don't want to dwell on it. We want to be able to get past it and everything. But anyhow, if somebody else has some...
No, thank you, Swamiji. Vrajaprana, since your name was mentioned, would you like to add anything else to this?
Yeah, I would, because I think a lot of us are seeing things on YouTube, films, whatever, that are deeply upsetting to us. We're seeing people being murdered in front of us, and we don't know them, but we weep. We think, how is this even possible? We don't, so many people are suffering so much, and so many people have suffered, and we were unaware of it. But I think my brother Atmajnananda is totally right. It shows that we have a heart, but that it also means that we can try to do something for them. Even if we don't know the person, there's nothing to stop us for praying for their welfare, that they move on. Suicide is such a thing that you definitely want to pray that they move on from whatever it was that was putting them in such depression and anxiety, that they be free from it. So your prayers can definitely help that person. That you will not only help that person, you'll help yourself. It's always good to put your prayers. They are very powerful and they work.
Thank you, Vrajaprana. Thank you, guys. Let's go ahead to our next question. Vikram, what's our next live question?
Our next question, Swamiji, is from Pepe, who's joining us from Guadalajara. Pepe, you should be ready to go. now.
And please remember, try to just get right to the point of the
Okay.
question, please.
Ready?
Go ahead, Pepe.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Namaste, Swamiji, Pravrajika. Namaste all. That from which all words return having failed to reach. It's a quotation.
Pepe, what's your question?
The question is, when I follow that, you found to a place where you smash against determinism right there. The final jump you have to make there, is it by faith? If you cannot pull yourself by yourself right there. And the final approach, is it faith? Is it determined? What has been your experience about that?
Very good
For
question.
all.
Would anybody like to address this question? As I understand, the question is basically, through your self-effort, you've come to a point where, how do you go from that extreme point of self-effort to the ultimate reality itself? Because whatever you do, there's a point, the finite, whatever you're doing is still finite. How do you get to the infinite? That's, as I understand, and he's asking, is this predestination? Is it grace? How do you address this?
I can take a stab at that. Yes, even in the path of Advaita, in the path of non-dualism, grace has a place. And that's why you find a person like Ramana Maharshi, who taught the path of knowledge, taught non-dualistic truth, had the non-dualistic experience, was immersed in the non-dualistic experience, but he often spoke about grace. And the reason for that is, just as Pepe indicated, that you can put forth self-effort, and we should put forth self-effort as far as we can. But the finite cannot conquer the infinite, nor can finite actions, including sadhana, spiritual practice, conquer the infinite. If the infinite were the fruit of an action, even of a lifetime of spiritual practice, then it would be limited, and it would be limited, non-eternal, and limited in scope. And so the idea is that at some point the infinite has to take over, that through spiritual practice the mind is purified, but there has to be the grace from the teacher, grace from the self itself, or grace from God. And eventually a person finds, it is said that a person finds those three are the same: the grace of the self, one's own Atman, the true self, the grace of the Guru, and the grace of God are the same grace. But it has to come in one form or another, because the finite cannot conquer the infinite. The revelation has to come from the other side. So yes, we are the infinite, we are the self, but it's the ego that says, I'm going to meditate. I am going to practice discrimination between the real and the unreal. I'm going to practice Sakshi Bhava, being the witness. I'm going to practice discrimination between the seer and the seen, etc. And so we move closer and closer, the mind becomes pure, we get greater and greater understanding. We eventually get to where we have a feeling for the truth, not just a conceptual understanding. That's a low thing. It's important, but it's a low thing. We eventually get to where there's a feeling, an intuitive feeling of the truth of everything. But even that is not enough, because again, the infinite reveals itself, as it says in the Katha Upanishad itself, that the self is attained by the one that the self chooses. And so the problem with grace is that if we sit around waiting for grace, who knows how long we'll have to sit. And so we put forth self-effort until grace takes over, but grace has to take over. The grace of the self, grace of the Guru, or grace of God.
Thank you, Swamiji. Would anybody else like to add on to this? Okay, then we'll move on to our next question. Vikram, the next live question, please.
The next question, Swamiji, is from Shivani, who's joining us from Louisville in Kentucky. Shivani, you're up.
Hello, namaste, all the Swamijis. I'm very, very grateful for these wonderful 7-week sessions that you've had. I have one question. I'm quite new to this, and I'm in fact quite embarrassed by my question. I don't have initiation yet, and sometimes I feel I'm ready for it. I'm ready to get a japa or meditation, which I have not got yet, and yet I feel I'm not prepared enough. Is it something where the person feels an awakening within oneself to go and seek initiation? If you don't have a japa, do you sort of hover on the edges of spirituality? I don't know. I'm just so confused, and I just hope it's not a very dumb question. Thank you.
And where are you calling from again?
From Louisville, Kentucky.
Louisville,
May I add to it is the reason I am kind of concerned about this aspect is from September, quite likely, my husband and I will be on a sabbatical away in Japan, and I don't want to lose the continuity we've had through these sessions, and I want to take something with me there, and I feel, is japa the answer?
Would anybody like to address this? Vrajaprana, you have your hand raised? Go ahead.
If you're feeling like you might want or need initiation, go for it. Absolutely go for it, because it's very hard to really get centered on your meditation without it. And you'll find that your concentration improves a great deal. And there's a lot of power that comes with that, because you get not the power of the guru and the whole guru parampara behind him. So I really encourage you that if you're thinking of it, go for it.
And maybe because of coronavirus, that may not physically be possible, I'm assuming.
Everything is possible. If you have the desire, it will happen. One way or the other, if you have the desire, if you sincerely desire a spiritual life, if you sincerely desire to realize the divinity within you, you will absolutely you will get what you need.
Thank you.
Anybody else? You have to speak up because I can't see the speakers on my head.
Yeah. No, I would just like to not just agree, but really emphasize that the most tangible manifestation of grace in life is the grace of the Guru. We can talk about other things, human birth and desire for liberation, but the most tangible form of grace. And the greatest aid is feeling that connection and feeling that love and knowing that there's someone there who only cares for our well-being and is there to look after us and is bringing us into a whole family. And this feeling of belonging to a family is so helpful in spiritual life that anybody, exactly what Vrajaprana was saying, anybody who has any inclination should really pursue it. And in our tradition, of course, the personal connection with the Guru is important, but we feel that Sri Ramakrishna himself is the real Guru, and that through any conduit, that all of the Gurus of our order, that it's that power and love of Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother that are acting through the Guru. And when we receive the mantra, then we can have absolute faith. We take it up on our own and we may try it for a while, then we may give it up. We may think, oh, maybe this will be better, that'll be better. But if we take initiation, we should have absolute faith in the path that we're following. We should have absolute faith in the power of the name, of the mantra. It has a tremendous power to transform us. So I fully agree. Go for it.
Thank you, Swamis and Pravrajika. Let's go ahead and go to our next question. There's one question here. Next question was addressed to Swami Atmarupananda regarding Raja Yoga. I'll summarize the question. Question was, recently in my yoga class, I got into a difference of opinion about what Ishvara is in the Yoga Sutras. According to what I've heard what Swami Sarvapriyananda says, Ishvara is defined as Brahman, seen through Maya, which gives Ishvara. But in Raja Yoga, the person was saying that Ishvara is the repository of all knowledge. Can you please explain the difference of what Ishvara means in Vedanta and the Yoga Sutras? This was addressed to Swamis
Yes.
Atmarupananda.
Yes, yes, a good question, and the answer is in the question itself. So let me just expand on the question, because that is the answer. As Swami Sarvapriyananda had said, you report him saying, Ishvara, God is Ishvara in the Vedanta tradition, and Ishvara is the repository of all blessed qualities, as Ramanuja defines it, both he and she, and that which is beyond he and she. And Ishvara is also known as the Antaryamin, the soul of all souls, the witness of all souls, the witness of all jivatmans, etc. And so Ishvara is Brahman in relationship to the universe. We don't worship Brahman because Brahman is reality itself. There's not a relationship with Brahman. Brahman is. And from the standpoint of Brahman, there is no world, there is no universe, there's just truth. But that same reality seen from the standpoint of the universe, in relationship to the universe, is Ishvara. And so therefore we can worship Ishvara, we can pray to Ishvara and get a response. Ishvara is real. But in the Yoga Sutras, as you said, yes, as someone told you, it's true that Ishvara is very differently conceived. In the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali, there's not the idea of one reality. There are many Purushas, that is, many souls. And Ishvara is a special soul, a special Purusha Vishesha, a special Purusha, who is the repository of infinite knowledge. The idea, it's a wonderful idea. I won't take the time to try to support it philosophically now, but once you understand it, it's a beautiful idea and true to experience. The idea is that if there is such a thing as knowledge, and of course there is, we know so many things, then there must be somewhere infinite knowledge. We say that Newton discovered the principle of gravity. He didn't invent it, he discovered it. And so where was gravity sitting? So the idea is that there's the repository of infinite knowledge, and we have little bits of knowledge which we discover. And so Ishvara is the repository of infinite knowledge. Another point of Ishvara in the Yoga Sutras, which is also very beautiful and connected to the same point of knowledge, is that there must be perfection. If there is ignorance, bondage, and the possibility of perfection, then there must be realized perfection as well. And so Ishvara is realized perfection, realized omniscience, realized infinite knowledge. And since knowledge is awakened by another lamp of knowledge, or one lamp of knowledge is lit by another lamp of knowledge, there must be the original lamp of knowledge which first made the awakening to knowledge possible. And so that is Ishvara. So Ishvara is not the infinite reality, because there are many souls, and Ishvara is just another one. But Ishvara is the not just psychological archetype, but I'll use the term archetype, the archetype, the reality of infinite knowledge, infinite perfection.
Thank you, Swamiji. Anybody else? Just you have to speak up because I can't see you. Okay, so we'll go on to our next live question. Vikram, what's our next live question, please?
This works, Swamiji. The next live question is from Paragi. Paragi, I'm trying to unmute you. And if that doesn't work, we'll move on to the next. Oh, actually, Paragi, you're unmuted. You're ready to go. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Okay. Hello, namaskar, everybody. Namaskar, Swamiji and Pravrajika. I wanted to ask about, well, first of all, I wanted to share that when this whole coronavirus started back in March, I'm happy to say that I shared this in the interactive session that we had a couple of weeks ago, but I didn't panic. And I mean, and I definitely look towards any spiritual advice. So I'm so glad that there were several YouTube videos, including the ones from several Swamijis, also emails from a lot of the Swamijis. So I really appreciated that. One of the things that I noticed or that came to my mind was people, I thought this was an opportunity, like a wake-up call for people to realize or maybe start shedding their ignorance, the way I saw a relation with Vedanta. And another thing I noticed is not just people, but even corporations, just the way the world works, people, the way things are going. And I noticed that I felt like it was that wake-up call. But I also noticed after all these weeks that there are so many people that haven't taken that opportunity. So it's kind of scary. I feel like that people are missing maybe that opportunity, but it's kind of scary is what I'm trying to say. And I know that with the whole, if you look at the Kalyug and all that kind of stuff, I wanted to know.
What is your question? I'm sorry. Just so what is the question you want to ask?
The question is, I would like to know the opinion on this whole thought process of, you know, there are, I was just actually finishing the question, people out there that haven't, I'm seeing in reality, the people I'm surrounded by, not just, you know, just in general, that people aren't taking that wake-up call. So what is your opinion? Bottom line, I'm feeling like we're not, when in Vedanta, we're supposed to try to shed our ignorance. It's not happening even with this wake-up call.
Would anybody like to address that question? The question, I think, is basically that society, she's saying, is not waking up with this tragedy. Is society waking up to the call of going to their more spiritual nature?
Swami, we haven't heard from Chidekananda ji yet. Can we request him?
Okay. Yeah, I think in response to the question, I think that Brother Lawrence, in his practice of the presence of God, they asked him, there were lots of problems at that time, and they asked Brother Lawrence that so many problems are going on, what should we do? And Brother Lawrence replied that there are so many more problems that could be taking place in this world. And so what he basically said is that he just didn't give it much thought. He just prayed for those and then he put his mind back on God. And I think that what I personally feel is that rather than, we should not miss, I mean, it's good to be concerned about society and how, if society is waking up, but opportunity ourselves to go more within. And
thank you, Swamiji. Was that it? Okay. Thank you. So I think his point was to take this opportunity to really go within. Anybody else want to address anything else? Speak up if you want.
I can see a little.
Okay.
Whoever said.
Swami Atmarupananda, go ahead. Go ahead if you want to go.
No, we shouldn't be dismissive of how other people react to things, but we also shouldn't be over obsessive with it. What we can control is our own reaction to things, and we shouldn't be judging. We shouldn't be saying that, oh, these people, they're not learning such a clear lesson in front of them. This is Holy Mother's great teaching, of course, that we have plenty of failures within ourselves, plenty of times when we should have learned lessons from things that we haven't, that we shouldn't pay too much attention to if other people are not learning what we think they should be learning from it. That better for us, if we want to start looking for failures and shortcomings and things, that we'll find them within ourselves. So as I say, it doesn't mean that, of course, we want other people to also grow from this experience, but We don't want to put ourselves in a position of judging everyone also. And however much we can grow from it and feel compassion and charity for those maybe who haven't, that'll be for at least our benefit and probably the benefit of everyone.
Swami Atmarupananda, you wanted to add something?
No, that's okay. That expresses it.
Thank you. All right, Vikram, we'll go to our next live question. Thank you, Pardini.
The next question is from Durjoy, who's joining us from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Durjoy, you should be good to go.
Namaskar all Swamijis and Pravrajika, Mataji. I have two questions. One is, we often hear two words, tapa and titiksha. We know, the literally meaning I understand, but in real world parlance, how do we explain these two? If I have to correlate this to my daily life, how would I take tapa and titiksha as? That is my first question. And second question is, in spite of all the japas, and I know I'm not a very spiritually awakened person, but I've been practicing this philosophy since last 20 years. But in spite of that, there has been few incidents which I have not been able to forget and forgive. How to overcome such deep things and uproot them from inside my heart? Thank you.
It's an open question to everyone. Swami Sarvapriyananda, I know this is Titiksha and top of your Vedanta Sara comes in. Would you like to address this?
All right, briefly. That's easily done. If you look at the definition of Titiksha, it is the famous definition in Vivek Chudamani's Sahanam Sarva Dukkhanam Apratikara Purvakam Chinta Vilapa Rahitam Sa Titiksha Nigadyate. So when you put up with all the suffering that the world can throw at you, and that includes your own body and mind, and without complaint and without too much of a rush to remedy the situation. Of course, if you are ill, you take medicine. If there's the whole point is that you remain steady in your pursuit of Vedantic knowledge and realization. Don't get thrown off by what the world throws at you. And that's true. It's nothing extraordinary. Any great pursuit in life, whether you're making money or you are a scholar working for your PhD or whatever it is, we put up with so much trouble. To raise a family, for example, we put up with so much trouble over for such a long period of time. Illness and financial difficulties and ups and downs, success and failure. Pursue your goal through all of that, then only you attain success. So Titiksha is that, to pursue realization, your Vedantic sadhana in the midst of all ups and downs in life. Tapa has also a voluntary component where you take the initiative to discipline the body-mind system. So something like fasting, something like sticking to a routine rigorously, things like that. There are also external forms of tapasya. They all serve to increase willpower and your ability to bring the body-mind system under control. That's as far as the definition goes. But I think, how do you use it in your day-to-day life? And how do you deal with deep-seated trauma, anger, and resentment? I'll pass the ball.
All right. Anybody else? Maybe Vrajaprana, would you like to address that?
Well, I'll give an example, an autobiographical one from when I was a young teenager. I was 16 years old, and I was deeply in love with this young man, and I was extremely close to his family. And I loved his family, and I spent all my time at the family home. And then after all these plans that we made together, we were going to go to Europe together, be with his aunt, blah, blah, blah. I discovered that he was actually bringing another girl over to the house, to the family, and the family was upset about it, so I felt completely betrayed, hurt, bitter, angry, the wronged woman, right? And I had every reason to be spiteful, bitter, angry. So I went to my guru, Swami Prabhavananda. I said, Swami, I'm very bitter. And he said, no, you should not be bitter. I said, I am bitter. And I told him what happened. And he said, no, you must pray for them. And I said, I'm not going to pray for them. And he said, no, you must. You must feel Thakur putting his hand on your boyfriend's head and blessing him. I said, and he said, and you must do it for her, the other woman as well. I said, I'm not going to do that. And he said, you must. And because he was my guru and he absolutely said, I must do it, I was forced to do it. It was such a terrible pill to swallow because I felt I really earned it. I earned my anger. I had every reason to be bitter. I was the wrong woman. So over the entire long weekend that Swami Prabhavananda was here in Santa Barbara during this time, I was praying, feeling the blessing and all that. And by like Tuesday or so, I realized that the bitterness and the anger had kind of lifted. And you know what? I realized that I missed it. It's like, I earned this. It's my bitterness and anger. It's mine fair and square. And I thought, oh my God, you're such a petty human being. But it actually, I'm a great advocate of prayer. It really does work, especially for the people that we have hard times with. It's like, prayer is like a submarine. It's like underneath the surface with a periscope going up. They don't know you're doing it. It's very underneath the surface, but it's very powerful and it really works. It's good for them. It's much better for you.
Thank you, Vrajaprana, and thank you, Roy. Let's go to our next question, Vikram. Let's have a next live question.
The next question is from Rajendra. Rajendra, I'm trying to unmute you. Oh, you're good to go. Please go ahead with your question.
Namaste. This is a question for Sarvapriyananda and Atmarupananda. Can you explain to me, from the Keval Advait point of view, the relationship of Shankaracharya Advait and our concept of avatar? As best as I can understand, Arun Maharaj in one of the essays says, those two concepts are not compatible. And second part of the question will be, can you explain to me the relationship of Nirguna Brahman and Saguna Brahman? If Krishna was the controller of the Maya, and Keval Advait says the Maya is intertwined with Ishvara, how do you reconcile those two diametrically opposite viewpoints?
Should I go?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. Good to see you.
Namaste.
Namaste. Namaste. Yes. So when you ask questions like this, Advaita Vedanta has a very convenient way of dealing with it. And it's the idea of two levels of truth. So there is the paramarthik, the absolute truth, and the vyavaharika, the transactional empirical reality. And there are other levels, the pratibhasika, the level of error and appearance and so on. But the point here is, the ultimate truth is that there is only Nirguna Brahman, existence, consciousness, bliss. So when you say Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya Jiva Brahmevanapara, Brahman alone is real, the world is an appearance, and we sentient beings, we are actually none other than that one Brahman. So this is a statement of the absolute truth. When we started learning Vedanta in the training center as brahmacharis, in the Vedanta Sar class, we had to memorize one definition. Vastu Satchidanandam Advayam Brahma. The reality is the non-dual existence, consciousness, bliss, Brahman. Ajnanadi Sakala Jara Samuha Avastu. Everything starting from Maya downwards is not real. It's an appearance. So this sets up the thing for two levels of truth. In the transactional level, in the Vyavaharika level, you have Saguna Brahman, Brahman with Maya. Ishvara is a Vyavaharika at the level of Vyavahara. The avatar also would be at the level of Vyavahara. At the level of Vyavahara, Advaita accepts God, the world, individual, avatara. It will only say that ultimately all of these are nothing but Nirguna Brahman, ultimately. Yeah, does that... yeah, so that's the key to unlocking the answer to these questions in Advaita Vedanta. Yeah.
Swami Atmarupananda, would you like to add anything?
Yes, let me just add this from the other standpoint of the devotional standpoint. The problem that we find from the Advaitic standpoint, when the truth is explained from the Advaitic standpoint, is that it makes Ishvara also unreal. And so then we're told that we'll follow bhakti because that's the easy path. And that means if we take the simplistic view, the strict Advaitic explanation of what Saguna Brahman is, etc., and the avatara. It means that I'm going to follow an illusion until I can get to the real thing. And who is going to devote themselves to an illusion? If Ishvara, if the avatara, if they are illusions, then who is going to devote themselves wholeheartedly, give up their life, give up their everything for them, when eventually you have to get rid of them because they're illusions and go to the Nirguna Brahman. And so that I don't disagree with the ultimate truth, the Paramarthika Satya. But I do disagree with the way that it is expressed. And I don't mean the way Swami Sarvapriyananda expressed it, because he expressed the traditional viewpoint. I think it's therefore that Sri Ramakrishna often said that Ishvara is real. Because otherwise you get to, when you state it philosophically, you get to this where the Nirguna Brahman is the reality, and everything else is Vyavaharika. It's just a transactional reality. And eventually you go beyond Ishvara and you get to the real thing, Brahman. I think an experientially better way of expressing it, and I think more in tune with the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna, the Holy Mother, and Swamiji, who, by the way, didn't disagree with the fact that Brahman was the ultimate reality. Sri Ramakrishna, at the end of his life, said, "Why is it that I see now everything looks unreal? Everything is unreal." Of course, he knew why he was seeing it, but it was his way of expressing to others, "Why is it now everything looks unreal to me?" So Sri Ramakrishna didn't disagree that Brahman was the ultimate reality. Swamiji also taught that. Swamiji said that Ishvara is the highest reading of Brahman from the standpoint of the world. But again, the problem when you just take the idea that there are two truths, and the transactional truth is just a provisional truth, and Ishvara and the incarnation are just part of that, then they are relegated to unreality in the philosophical sense. So my feeling is that the reason Sri Ramakrishna always emphasized the reality of God is that Ishvara, yes, there is a point where one becomes so close to God that God and self both melt into Brahman. But you've come to see it more as going to the very heart of reality, rather than the philosophical explanation of going through unreality to the point where you can get to reality, and then you give up all of that nonsense of God and Ishvara and all of that stuff, which was just a provisional trick that you had to go through in order to get to the reality. So better to think in terms, I think, except for those who just want to follow Kevala Advaita and just to follow the path of knowledge. Better to think of God as Brahman in relationship to the universe, and not to think of God as a provisional, unreal appearance just for the sake of getting us to the point where we can get to Brahman and give it all up.
Vikram, can I ask a follow-up?
We have so many more questions, so we're gonna thank you for your share of offering.
Can I add a very small thing?
Yes, Swami, go ahead.
Yeah, if you read the introduction to the Great Master, there's a very beautiful interpretation of the avatar, very logical and rational. There's not in conflict at all with the Advaita Vedanta. Swami Chidekananda, I think, is one of the most helpful aspects of the entire book, which is a fantastic book. That he talked about the Adhikarika Purushas and how this concept developed into what we call the avatar today, and I think you'll find that helpful.
Thank you, Swamiji. So I have a question here. Vikram, that question, the email about the alcoholism, if you can pull that up and be ready to ask that question. This question I have is from Medha, and it's specifically to Pravrajika Vrajaprana. And the question is, how to get out of the genetic, physical, and mental suffering when our entire thought processes and actions are guided by karma? How do we get out of this genetic, physical, and mental suffering when our entire thought process and actions are guided by our past karma? Vrajaprana.
current actions and current thoughts are our own free will. Everything that brings us up to all of our experiences that we've had are the result of karma. But everything that we do now, everything that we think now is the result of our own free will. So if we want to live in a better life, if we want to have a happier mind, we can make a decision to think in a way that's more positive, that's more, we can actually decide how we want to think by simply looking at our own thoughts and noticing them one by one. It's like, oh, no, I don't want to go there. Let me go here. Every action that we do, no, I don't want to go there. This has not made me happy. This is the way I want to go. I don't think anything should be that definitive. It's like everything is kind of set in stone. Our experiences are the result of our karma. Our current actions, our current thoughts, our own free will. And we can, if we've made our bed up to now, we can make our bed in the future, how we want to be, what experiences we wish to have in the future.
So Vrajaprana, let me play devil's advocate here.
Yep.
Suppose the person would say, well, I'm an alcoholic, I'm heavy in addictions. My free will, I don't have much free will. Whenever I see something, I get the stimulus, I have to act on impulse. Where's my free will at that time? And then how can I get better if I'm being overcome by my passions and my desires that I feel I have no control over?
What we have to do is like moment by moment. It's a tough addiction. It's a tough position to be in, but it's not unfixable. There's wonderful, like, I'm a big supporter of AA. We have a lot of our friends and devotees are in the program. It works so well with Vedanta. But it's like, okay, so far the impressions in my mind, I've got so many heavy impressions in my mind that are influencing my mind and my will to go towards alcohol as the solution for my desire to be happier. I'm going to start making a decision right now that I'm going to do something else because I need to change the balance of the contents of my mind. I need to change it so that this side gets heavier, that this is what I'm going to do now because that has not made me happy in the past. I feel the impulse. This is what I am thinking is going to make me happy. It's not. I'm going to pick up the phone, call my sponsor. Okay. Then I'm going to go out for a walk. I'm going to read a chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. I'm going to say a mantra walking, and I'm going to make myself new habits. It's like building a brick house by hand. It's not easy, but you start with one brick, and then you do another brick, and then you get that trowel, and you do it again. But that's how any of us build our own mind, our own life, our own future. Nothing is impossible, and you will have, if you really pray about it and ask for help, you will absolutely get it. And if you have a lapse, you won't be the first, you won't be the last. Get up again, get back to that house, build that house, put in those bricks.
Thank you, Vrajaprana.
And we'll all be behind you. We'll all be behind you in that fight. You can do it. You can do it.
Thank you. Anybody else would like to add anything? Okay. This next question goes to, it's from Gertie. She's asking a question to Swami Chidekananda. What is the significance of the pilgrimage or the benefit of going to Badrinath? What is the significance of your pilgrimage going to Badrinath? And also, what's the significance of why do we go on pilgrimage?
Yeah, I think that like this during this COVID-19 times, like what we talked about last week, that the significance is that it's not just some Swami Sarvapriyananda mentions in the Great Master about Lila Chinta, but if we do these, as we talked about last week, if we do this pilgrimage mindset in the right way, then this becomes like a not only Lila Chinta, that's Ishvara, that's thinking about God and God's interactions with his devotees. But this becomes actually your own interactions with God when you go on a pilgrimage. This becomes your own personal Lila Chinta. And And I think what we talked about last time, it's during this time, especially during this COVID-19, when we're expected to stay at home, that we can continue now to cultivate those thoughts that we had and bring more and more emotion into it. And we talked about that last week. I think that the more, whether it's this Jnana Vedanta, Raja Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, or pilgrimage as a yoga, unless you can bring that antarik swabhav, that bring it into your very heart and make it really for you, unless you can bring that emotion into it, then if we can do that, then, because I've seen many devotees right now in India, I talk to them, and many of them are doing really well. They're thinking of this coronavirus as a blessing. And some of them are thinking about their pilgrimages. They're going over their, where they visited. Others are reading the Bhagavatam for the first time, but they're all, somehow it's not just a matter of words. We're talking about words, but somehow it's connecting with the heart. It has to connect with the heart, not just the mind. Even this Jnana Yoga that we talk about, there's that Kathopanishad sloka, Yameva Esha Vinute Tena Labhyaha, Tasyesha Atma Vivinate Tanum Swam. Yameva Esha Vinute, Vinute meaning he who yearns after it. And you can bring that emotion, that enthusiasm into it. And I think Atmarupananda would know, I think the 22nd sloka of Patanjali Yoga Sutras, Viprasam Veganam Asannaha. So success is for the extremely, is quick, or the extremely energetic. So we have to somehow bring that emotion. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about pilgrimage. It's just not about pilgrimage. Even if we attend talks from Sarvapriyananda, even if we mix with sadhus, how to bring emotion into that, so that our own minds become stimulated and we can begin that journey within. Without that emotion, without that vyakulata, which we talked about last week, I don't think it's possible actually to go further within. And I think that that's what we talked about. So pilgrimage is important for that, to try to bring that into our own experiences. It's not somebody else's experiences. So the more we can do that, I think the more successful we can try to be in our spiritual life.
Thank you, Swami. Thank you so much. Vikram, were you able to find that email?
Yes, Swamiji. What would you like me? Do you want me to paraphrase?
Go ahead, read it out and address it to the audience. It's a question for the Swamis and Pravrajika, I believe.
I think you've addressed it. It's basically, what can a devotee of the Holy Trio do if he or she finds themselves faced with an addiction?
Okay, so we've addressed that question. All right. Let's go to our next live question.
The next live question is from Jyoti, who's joining us from Bangalore. Jyoti, you're up.
Yeah. Namaste.
Hi, Jyoti. Yep. Could you enable your video? Awesome. Thank you.
Right. Namaste, everybody. I have this question for Vrajaprana ji. Basically, it's about spirituality among children. All right. Children are very comfortable when they want to express their interest in sport or in studies or even in art. They're very comfortable trying to express in front of. Am I audible?
Yes, you are. Yes.
Yeah, in front of others or the audience. But when it comes to expressing their faith or their spirituality, or even that want to show that they pray, they feel very shy. They're very embarrassed. Why is that so? And how can we change it? Is it possible?
Who is the question addressed to?
To Vrajaprana ji.
Okay. Vrajaprana?
I think you're their best spiritual teacher, so they're going to emulate you. So even if they're shy about it, let them do it in their own way, and they'll come to it naturally. But the most important thing that you can do is make yourself their role model. Be regular in your practice, do things, and then they'll want to follow you and do it. Do your own chanting, do your own practice, do your own your incense and light and your flowers, and they'll want to do it naturally without you having to. You don't want it to be like a quiz that they might fail, because that might be a really bad thing to fail. So you want them just to do something that comes naturally, and you do it, and then let them do it in their own way. and they'll come to it naturally.
Would anybody
Yeah,
else
I mean,
like to address this? Yes, go ahead. Monkey, yes.
I see, when it comes to, if it is a sport, the parent might not be, even involved in an outdoor sport, but the child does it automatically, right? If he has the inclination, and even it could be with respect to art. But why is it is not so with spirituality? I mean, why do we have to set a role model to them? Or do we need to bring a change in the way things are in the society to inculcate that spirituality in the child, is what I wanted to understand. Somewhere, are we lacking as a society?
I think, sports is easy to show, and art and music are easy to show. Spirituality is so deep and so personal that it's an inner feeling. So really, again, the mother is Adiguru. You're the first teacher. So you set the example, your own righteous actions, your own correct thoughts, your own feelings, your words, even as whatever you may say, you don't realize how much they're listening to you. Those are the clues they're going to go to before anybody else. It's going to be you. So you do the right thing. You try to be the best role model you can as far as spiritual life and what they should do vis-a-vis society. And they'll follow your example. It might take them a while. They might rebel a little bit. But just the fact that they're shy about it isn't a bad thing. It's such a personal thing. I mean, I remember feeling that way myself when I was a little girl. I couldn't bring myself to say the word Jesus. It embarrassed me. I don't know why, but it seems so personal. So that's my take.
Thank you, Vrajaprana. The next question is from Anjali, and she asked, how do these Vedanta teachings help an individual to face the last moments of life, especially when there are some regrets, unfulfilled desires, or dreams, confessions, negativity, etc., still lingering in the mind? It's a question to open up to anybody. Anybody like to address this? Swami Atmarupananda, we haven't heard from you in a while.
Okay, I can begin. I've seen with many devotees and monastics also, that one of the proofs that Vedanta works is seen in the lives of many who have come to the point of death. And you see by that time the transformation that has taken place. And so we shouldn't wait until the point of death to start practicing Vedanta. It's something we take up now in life and practice, but that will enable us to face death with from a spiritual standpoint. I've seen with many, even very ordinary people who started out as very ordinary, without great, not with inborn spiritual tendencies and so forth, but who took up the practices, lived their ordinary lives, and yet by the end of their life, you could see that it had worked, that they were transformed. And so as far as unfulfilled things, everyone is going to come to their end of their life unless they have attained to realization with some things that are unfulfilled and things that are loose ends in life and things that they couldn't correct and things that they couldn't get right and so forth. That by the time we come to the end, we just have to let it go. And we have to learn to do that now itself. One of the things that meditation teaches us to do is when we sit for meditation, we let the outer world go. And so meditation in one sense, I don't mean in the primary sense, so don't get me wrong, but in one sense, meditation is a way of learning how to die. Because in meditation, what we're trying to do is to let go of everything. Let go of the insufficiencies, let go of all of the loose ends, let go of the negativities, and to focus on the divine, either on the self or on God. And so that is a great preparation for death. And so don't worry about loose ends and things like that. Those, as we get towards the end, those will take care of themselves. I've seen, even with people who are not on a spiritual path, like my father, who was a very good man. He was a religious man, but he wasn't a spiritual aspirant. He was a Protestant Christian and a believer, but not somebody who was practicing disciplines and all of that. But when it came time to die, all of and he was a person who didn't think he was alive unless he was worrying about things, unless he was anxious about something. That was the way he was sure that he was still alive, was to worry about things. But when he came the last 2 weeks of his life, all of that left him. All of that left him. When I went to see him, when by that time he was in a end-of-life facility, I went in and he just was so full of blessings. And the last thing he said was, "I've had a wonderful life." And so don't worry about the end of life. Practice now in learning how to detach yourself, how to focus the mind on God, and let other things fall into place. Things won't fall into place by settling accounts, because you never settle the accounts.
Swami, maybe I can follow up on this a little bit and ask you a question here. We had a devotee, Mother Clemmy, who was a practitioner and longtime sadhaka, and as she was passing, a few weeks before she passed away, she was also having negative thoughts come up in her mind. And it seemed like it was just an unraveling, sort of like a magician bringing out blue, red. So these things were coming out, and she was asking why these things, even though she had practiced spirituality for 50, 60 years and had tremendous experiences, still these things were coming up in her mind, negative experiences, but then they were going. Is that part of the natural process of as we start to meet the end of our life?
Yes, that is part of the natural process, and that doesn't mean anything bad. The Holy Mother herself said that when you take different colored pieces of string and tie them together to make a long piece of string, and then you roll it up into a ball, if you unwind the ball of string, you get each piece of color as you had tied it and wound it up. You get it, and so at the end of life, we go through a process of resorting all of our experiences of life. That's why many old people sort of chew the cud. That is, they're always thinking about past experiences. And that is accelerated oftentimes near the actual end of life, where all of these experiences, we're going through them. It's said that even Nag Mahashaya, the great saint, that he went through something like that. His wife was very disturbed and said, you told us that at the end you would be completely free of delusion. What is happening? And so that happens. That's completely natural, and that's a necessary process. And at the time of death, it's said, and some people who have had near-death experiences come back and report that it's true. At the time of death, your whole life passes in front of you. It's said at the time of illumination, the final realization, all of your lifetimes pass in front of you. But at the time of death, this lifetime passes in front of you. And what is happening when that does, and what was happening with Mother Clemmy? It's that you are seeing all of the experiences of your life and learning the lessons that you didn't learn in life from those experiences, and the memories of your life are resorting themselves according to importance. And so there's great meaning in that, and that's not something to be feared. And if someone like Mother Clemmy is going through that, then we can be of help in reassuring them that this is a natural process that will aid them in their spiritual evolution.
Thank you so much, Swamiji. Anybody else would like to add anything?
I can say a couple of
yes,
things.
Swami, please go ahead.
This type of thinking is very important, not so much for the end of life, but for our present. And this is why Sri Ramakrishna said that one should constantly remember death. Remember that this life will end. He used to say it has a 2 days existence. So that at the end, we won't have regrets. And I look at it from 2 points of view. One, if we lead a dharmic life, and especially for the householder, if the householder can say, yes, I raised the family, I contributed to society, I did everything that was expected of me. The children are grown up, they've gone to college, they've been married, whatever. or even if they don't, I did my best. That's number one. And number two, from the spiritual point of view, if we can really tell ourselves, yes, I was sincere. I made a sincere effort. Whether I realized God or not realize God, that wasn't in my hands, but I made a very sincere effort. This can lead to that ultimate contentment at the very end. The Holy Mother had a beautiful statement. She said that there's no greater virtue than forbearance, and no greater treasure than contentment. So really, if we want to assure ourselves of some type of contentment at the very end, then these two things, I think, if we can tell ourselves that yes, I did what was expected of me in life, and I made a full, sincere effort to realize what I feel is the ultimate goal of life, then we should not have nothing to worry about at the end.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Swamiji. Okay, let's go to our next question. Vikram, let's get the next live question, please.
The next live question is from Rishi, who's joining us from Wayne in New Jersey. Rishi, you're ready to go.
Pranam, Pravrajika, and Swamijis, and everyone. Hope you can hear me. I have two questions, if it's okay. The first question is happiness that alternates with misery. Is it accurate to define them as a greater amount of suffering alternating with a lesser amount of suffering? Or is there a technical definition for like Sukha and Dukkha or something? And the second question is it true that all the forms of God that can be experienced, can they be likened to how yogis have kind of emanated these vibrations, and that if you tune yourself to that frequency, then like Durga or Rama or even Bhagavan Shyamakrishna, if you tune yourself to that frequency, is that like a means to connecting to that vibration and being one with that frequency? Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Swami Sarvapriyananda, you haven't talked a little bit. Maybe we can have you address this.
Okay. So Rishi's first question was about Sukha and Dukkha. There are actually definitions of Sukha and Dukkha, very simple definitions. So Sukha is an anukula vritti. That means that which is experienced by oneself as being according to one's likes or what one would want to happen. So that is congenial to oneself. And Dukkha is a vritti, a modification of the mind which is experienced as being unpleasant. It's important to stress that experience by oneself, because the same thing for somebody else or for the same person at a different time, Sukha and Dukkha could change. But yeah, basically pleasant and unpleasant experiences, and that depends on the person. So that's Sukha and Dukkha. And that is to be contrasted with Ananda. Ananda, the Satchidananda, existence, consciousness place, is not lots of that particular kind of Sukha. It's not a lot of series of pleasant experiences, not like that. It is more like a limitless fulfillment, greater than which there's nothing to be desired for, and being established in which even the greatest amount of dukkha will not budge you, will not affect you. So it's interesting that when you realize we realize our own nature as Ananda, as that bliss nature, the stream of Sukha Dukkha keeps on flowing. The stream of Sukha Dukkha is generated by our past karma. So good karma leads to Sukha, and bad karma leads to Dukkha. Swami Vivekananda put it this way: good, good, bad, bad, and none escape the law. But then he says, far beyond name and form is Atman ever free. So that Ananda is our nature, the Atman, which is ever free. So in enlightenment, we realize ourselves as that Ananda. And the flow of Sukha and Dukkha, which continues as long as there's a body and this embodied existence, that will continue, but that does not affect you anymore. In fact, all of spiritual practices, whether jnana, the way I explained it, is a jnana approach, or by meditation, or by deep devotion to your chosen deity, or by just this being a well-wisher of everybody, a karma yogi ever engaged in the well-being of others. in all of these ways, it helps you to overcome this pursuing Sukha and being terrified and avoiding Dukkha. Sukha Dukkha, the stream of Sukha Dukkha becomes unimportant, whichever path you follow. Yes. And the second one, would somebody else want to?
The second one was all forms of God are, how are they? Are they tuning into different vibrations of consciousness, and that's how we get these forms?
Would anybody else?
Okay.
I'd like to say something about that, because it will also give me a chance to say better something I tried to say before and was not successful. First, directly about the question. Swami Vivekananda said that in talking to Nivedita about the deities, he said, it is Brahman, but it is also the gods, meaning the gods and goddesses. That reality is the ultimate reality, and it also expresses itself as the gods and goddesses. And he also said, not at that same time, but in another conversation, he said that these deities are forms that sages have seen in deep states of meditation. So just like mantras, is not that there was a committee of sages that they made up some sounds and said, well, this is a nice sound, let's meditate on that. And if you repeat it enough times, you'll go into a trance and then you'll realize something. No, the mantras were heard, as Swami Vijnanananda ji said, deep states of consciousness. They're revealed sounds, Om and all of the Bija mantras. And so with the forms of God, those are forms that are revealed in deep states of consciousness. Now, artists have given different expressions to them. And so Swamiji told Nivedita, when Nivedita had started her girls' school, and told Swamiji that in art class, she wanted the children to try to paint paintings of Kali. He said, let them express it in their own way. Don't try to force them into the traditional form that it has to be exactly like this. Let them express Kali as they wish, because he wanted that expressiveness and creativeness to come back into India, which he found and stated many, many times, that India, because of the millennium of invasions, had become repetitive. That is, it had become self-protective. It had to, but in becoming self-protective, it had become repetitive rather than creative. And so these forms were forms that are seen in deep states of meditation. So let me just add to that. Before, when I was talking about the Saguna and Nirguna, I was trying to say something and couldn't quite make the distinctions in my own mind and couldn't get out what I wanted to say. So the main point I wanted to make is that what Swami Sarvapriyananda ji said is true, that the Saguna and Brahma and Nirguna Brahman is the ultimate reality, and the Vyavaharika truth is everything else. But that is from the standpoint of jnana. And that's why it's very important that we have a consistent view, have a consistent way of looking at the world and religion with our path. If one is following the path of knowledge, then yes, that is a very good definition. I want to know the reality itself. I'm not looking for a relationship. I'm not looking to realize a personal God. I'm not seeking to pray and to worship. Everything is within Maya except for that, and I want that. And so that is a very good definition for the path of knowledge. If you are following a path of devotion, it is not a good working definition. Because again, and that's the problem with philosophy, is that philosophy is an act of the mind, which is within Maya, which depends on duality and depends on distinctions. And that's why no philosophy is perfect, because a philosophy is an act of the mind to understand something which is actually reality, which is beyond mind. And so to follow the path of devotion, those who attained to non-dualistic experience through the path of devotion, and there are many examples through history, both Sufis, Christian mystics, and Hindu mystics, all of them realized there were some among all of those who realized a non-dualistic state through devotion. They didn't come back and say that, oh, I finally realized the truth and God is unreal. No, they said that I came to the point where all distinction between God and me disappeared, or among Christian saints like Angelina de Foligno, that the very idea of the Trinity disappeared, and only the fathomless profundity of the Godhead, the reality remained, and where I was and where God was, there was no saying. And so it was from the devotional standpoint, it's sinking into the profound depths of the heart of God. It's not God is a provisional reality just while you're in transactional reality, and eventually you throw that away and you get to the real thing, which is Brahman. No, from a devotional standpoint, that's not at all a helpful thought. From a devotional standpoint, even if you want to combine non-dualism with the devotion, you have to understand, or well, one way to understand it, I shouldn't say you have to understand it, but one way to understand it is that the depths of experience where I disappear and God as a separate existence disappears, and we become one in the reality itself. So that was what I was trying to say. Not that the Advaita philosophy is wrong, but that is meant from a standpoint of jnana, because what the jnani wants is nirguna Brahman. It doesn't care about other things. So push other things aside.
Thank you, Swamiji. Thank you. There's a question, let's have maybe Vrajaprana address this. The question was, what is the difference between, in the Bhagavad Gita, it talks about a stita pragya, one established in wisdom, and a Brahma Gyani. Is there a difference between these two concepts? Vrajaprana? And if Swami Atmaganji also wants to join in, and Swami Chidekananda, please do. Vrajaprana?
Well, I'm probably not. I'm just going through my mind the verses of the Bhagavad Gita on the Sthita Pragyasika Bhasha Samadhistasha Keshava. Yes, to me, and that's hardly my field. Yes, to me, that would be a perfect exemplar of what a Brahmagyani would be. It would also be the perfect devotee. You see, I find it difficult to really pull that apart and say this philosophy and that philosophy. It's like, if you are a real Sthita Pragya, you've made the home run. The label doesn't really matter here.
Okay.
To me, they're one and the same, but that's not my area of strength.
Sure.
I would defer on that question.
Swami Atmaganji, would you like to add anything to this?
Yeah, the knower Brahman, or God realized soul, that we have so many examples in the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna, can manifest that divinity in a variety of different ways, and we have different paradigms. So the Sthita Prajna is one paradigm of a God-realized soul, or a knower of Brahman. We read in the different texts in the Bhagavata and Viveka-Chudamani, and something that Thakur talked about all of the time, that sometimes this God-realized soul is like a child, sometimes like a madman, sometimes like a ghoul, and sometimes like an inert thing. And there can be many, many other paradigms. The Sthita Prajna is one particular type where there are no ups and downs, this and that. If we look at some of the other examples, Chaitanya Deva, Sthita Prajna is not singing and dancing and weeping and all of that. That doesn't mean that Chaitanya Deva is not a knower Brahman or a God-realized soul. And we look at even Swamiji, who was the embodiment of wisdom and knowledge. Even he was such an emotional mess sometimes, with all the ups and downs. And some of his letters we read after he was finally recognized for the work that he did in the West. He wrote to Mary Hell, "I'm weeping like a woman." He was so emotional. So this being a knower of Brahman doesn't mean that, or every knower of Brahman will be like the Sthita Prajna that we read about in Gita. That's emphasizing this calmness and this same-sightedness and equanimity of mind and all of that. It depends on the path that we take and the personality that we have, the nature that we have, that after God realization will manifest in all different ways, tremendous variety of different ways.
Thank you. Anybody else would like to add anything on that question? Okay. Vikram, let's go to our next live question.
Yes, Swamiji, this may or may not work. The next live question could be from Nilanjana, who is joining us from Kolkata. Nilanjana, you should be unmuted. Nilanjana, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, can you enable your video, please?
Yes.
Let me unmute you again. If it gets too technical, we're going to move on. Go ahead.
Yeah.
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. I have a small question, because in our session you have said, the Swami Pranam Maharaj and Mataji, that one thing that we have learned, that we can't change others, only we can change ourselves, and not to react. What Ma has said, or if dosh dekho na. But just before some days, I have accounted with a experience of staff of my workplace who have taking money from the poor, and for that we have to discontinue. But I was rather disturbed that someone is losing job in these difficult times. But then I heard this in your classes in the next day, very next day. And I am really confused. Am I right? Because if a person is doing wrong to the society, can't we do anything against him, or can't we can't we react on it, or what will be our stand? This is my question.
Would anybody like to begin this question?
I can just reminded of one of Swamiji's statements, that this perfect non-reaction is for the sannyasin, not for the householder. For the householder, that if there's injustice, you have to fight against injustice. So we shouldn't confuse the two different types of instructions that we read. But we have to be very cautious. When is it our role to do it? What are the ramifications if we do it? Are we doing it at a charitable standpoint? There are a lot of considerations, and we have to be very careful. Are we getting ourselves in trouble? Will we lose our own job? But sometimes we have to take a stand. If there's real injustice and we're sitting by not doing anything, then we're also participating in that injustice. So a very complex issue. There's not a very simple answer to that, but we shouldn't feel that if we're spiritual people, that it means we simply forbear and we don't do anything about it. The Swamiji was very insistent on that point for the householder fight.
Thank you, Swamiji. Anybody else like to add anything?
If I may.
Yes.
Yes, I was reminded of something I saw in a classroom in one of our Ramakrishna Mission schools in Jamshedpur. So in one of the classrooms, there was this, they have wise sayings written in the classroom. So there's this saying which was really struck my mind, and this was more than 20 years ago. It said, in every situation, ask yourself, am I a part of the problem or of the solution? So we ask ourselves in this situation, am I adding to the problem or am I adding to the solution? Am I contributing to the solution? Often we may find to our surprise that we are exacerbating the problem, that we are digging ourselves deeper into, or we are trying to solve it in such a way that it creates more trouble than it is of benefit to others. Yes. So always try to be part of the solution. Always try to contribute to an easing of tension.
Thank you, Swamiji. Anybody else? Thank you so much. I see we have about 16 minutes left. So before we go into any other questions, I had posed a simple question. I wanted about more inspiration. And I want to take this opportunity maybe to gather some inspiration from some of our Swamis. The question I posed to the Swamis was, please maybe, if you can tell us of a mentor, someone who inspired you in spiritual life, please share that person. And also, how did they inspire you in spiritual life? What were some one or two or few qualities that inspired you, that has helped you develop, that has helped you grow in spiritual life? So I want to put this question, and within 2 minutes or less, just to basically just give a brief answer. We'll start again from our senior Swami, Swami Atmarupananda, and work our way down. Swamiji, do you mind sharing a little bit? It gives devotees always ask me to have the Swamis share something about their own spiritual life, because life inspires life. And so we'd ask you to open up and maybe share a little bit about who inspired you in spiritual life, and what were some of the qualities about them that did?
Yes, it's a beautiful question and a beautiful thing to think about. For me, when I was a young monk, I joined in 1969. I went to India first in 1971 and went back to live in India in 1975. So at that time, there were many disciples of Holy Mother, Swami Brahmananda, still alive. I even met a woman who had served Sri Ramakrishna, Bhavatarini Upadhyay, and met 5 people who knew Swami Vivekananda. And so among those, the people that inspired me the most, because I had some association with them, were my guru, Swami Vrajaprana, a disciple of Holy Mother, who also knew many of the direct disciples very closely. Swami Nirvanananda, who was a disciple of Swami Brahmananda and also closely associated with the other direct disciples. Swami Saradeshananda, Gopesh Maharaj, who was a disciple of Holy Mother. And so I'm not going to tell about all of them. What inspired me about all of these, and I can mention Bharat Maharaj also, Swami Abhayananda, disciple of Holy Mother. What inspired me about all of them was that I had the feeling that I could seeing them was seeing spirituality. I felt just looking at them that I was looking at spiritual beauty. I used to just watch Swami Saradeshananda when he was living at Bellarmut for a couple of months during my training center time. When he would go in the afternoon, I would go to a place where I could watch him walk, and I would just stand in a corner where I wasn't obvious. I wasn't hiding, but I wasn't obvious. I just walking up and down, because I found such beauty in just looking at him, and felt that here is visible spirituality. And when I would go to Swami Nirvanananda ji daily and Swami Vireshwarananda ji daily, there also I just felt that they didn't look like they were physical beings. They looked like they were spiritual beings just manifesting there. And so that spiritual beauty seemed visible, and that was a great inspiration. It made spirituality real.
Wow, thank you so much, Swamiji. Pravrajika Vrajaprana, I think, would you like to share?
My guru, Swami Prabhavananda. When I came to the Vedanta temple in August of 1967, I knew nothing about Vedanta. I didn't know what the word meant. I came here only to distribute pamphlets against the war in Vietnam. In the parking lot, I had no interest but the windshield wipers to put the slats in. But the guy that I was too young to drive, so they paired me with a guy who could drive. So he said, well, let's go in. And I said, can we go in there? And he said, sure, it's really beautiful. It's 1967, right? It's really beautiful, man. Okay, man, let's go in. So we go in and we sit down, and Swami Pavitrananda is speaking, and I can't understand a word he's saying except for God. He had a very thick accent, and I'd never heard any accent at all. So at the end, we go down, and Swami Pavitrananda shakes very formally, shakes the hand. I move next to him, and there's little Swami next to him. And he just looked at me and smiled. He touched my hand, just kind of put his hand over mine, and just looked at me and smiled. And I burst into tears, and I couldn't stop crying. I cried and cried and cried. And finally, I blurted out, I physically couldn't move. I finally blurted out, "You're so beautiful." Which brings to mind what Swami Atmarupananda just said. I'd never seen any being like that. I had such disregard for religion. I'd been disappointed by everything. But to meet someone who actually could pour out love and to just transmit purity and love and just this great joy. And I thought I was a big political activist up to then, and then it was like that's over. Whatever he has is what I want. And so I made an appointment as soon as I can. And because, you know, you're 15, immature, what do you expect of a 15-year-old? I said to him in my appointment, I said, Swami, have you seen God? And he said, he closed his eyes and little trickles of moisture came out from the sides of his eyes. And he looked up and he put his head down. He looked up and he looked at me. He said, yes, I have. And you can too. I was hooked. It's like, it's not for the special holy people that only them descended from on high. No. If he said, I can do it, I can do it. And so I had a guy, I thought, then he told me to read The Eternal Companion. It's like, if you guys there, if none of you read The Eternal Companion, what's wrong with you? Read The Eternal Companion. Do it now, order it online, do it. You'll be changed. Totally be changed. And then Maharaj was again saying, it's in the palm of your hand. It's so, if you make the effort, you can have it. And that was like, yes, we can do it. We can do it. No question, that was my life's greatest influence.
Thank you so much, Pravrajika Vrajaprana. Wow, wonderful. Let's go to Swami Atmajnananda Maharaj. Would you love to share a little bit about?
Yeah.
Okay.
Of course, Swami Swanandaji, of course, was the greatest influence in my spiritual life. I was with him for many years, and we had a very special relationship. He did a very nice thing by sending me to his hometown. I really became part of the family, almost, you could say. And his broadness, his liberal nature, and everything were so helpful to me that I have to mention him. But I want to talk about, I'll just mention two. One is Swami Bhuteshanandaji, who was my sannyas guru. I have never seen such an example of pure, innocent joy and the sweetness of personality. See, this divinity is fine, but when this divinity shines clearly through such a sweet personality, there's something very, very special about it. And how every morning when the monks would go to make pranam, how the monks just looked forward to it every morning, that for 15 or 20 minutes, everyone would be spellbound. He would keep everyone in stitches, laughing. And all because of his simplicity and purity, such a pure joy. It was a wonderful thing to see. But the other great example for me, many of you knew him, was Swami Lokeshwaranandaji. Yes. And what I learned from him, and I shouldn't say I learned it, because I certainly, I accept it as a great ideal, but very few people really have that tremendous broadness and ability to have the same level of degree and respect for everyone. We have a saying that if you want to be a sadhu, first learn how to be a gentleman. He was the ultimate gentleman. We treated everyone the same. I saw so many examples. If you were outside of his room and you heard him speaking, you wouldn't know if he was speaking to one of the servant boys who was serving him tea, or if he was speaking to the Chief Justice Rai, who used to walk with him every morning. He just had that dignity, that quiet dignity, and showing respect to everyone. It's a wonderful quality in spiritual life. So let me just say that these three, in particular, many others, of course, but these three in particular, I hold in very special esteem and with great gratitude that I was able to have their company.
Wow. Thank you, Swamiji. Swami Sarvapriyananda.
Yes, I joined the order in Ramakrishna Mission Vidyapith, Deoghar. And many of the names which the Swamis mentioned, I remember myself, though I belong to a much later generation. But of course, I remember Bhuteshanandaji because I took Mantra Diksha from Maharaj. And I was lucky to watch him at close quarters for 1 year towards the end of his life. I was at Saradapet. And yes, as Maharaj just said, I remember those early morning sessions where we'd all go to offer pranams, and those 15-20 minute little talks, and the tremendous the humor, the solemnity, the upliftment, and just general everybody felt uplifted, like hundreds of people all around. Lokeshwaranandaji, yes, I was a kid. Once Swami Lokeshwaranandaji is sitting in a meeting in the Institute of Culture, a very important meeting, a foreign delegation was there. And this little kid just barged in. I think nobody stopped him because he was a little boy. Just walked in, and Swami Lokeshwarananda dropped everything and started speaking to this little boy and asked him where he is from. And the boy was saying how he visited Belur Math, and Swami Lokeshwarananda behaved with the little boy as if he has not seen Belur Math. He said, Belur Math, what did you see? What's it like? Did you like it? Will you come again? And then he said, there's some books, take some books. And the boy went away, never to forget that. And I was that boy. So yeah. I was maybe 8 or 9 years, but I've never forgotten that. It's amazing. Ranganathanandaji, extraordinary again. But also, I remember my initial days in the Deoghar ashram. We were really blessed to have the blessings and company of a set of wonderful senior monks. Swami Suhitanandaji, of course, was the head of the ashram, who is now the vice president of the order. His constant inspiration, training, his attention to the novices. So we really benefited from close attention from training from Swami Suhitanandaji. This inspiration all the time that God realization is your goal from day one onwards, that it is possible, you must attain it in this very life, the importance of spiritual practices, the regularity of a routine, the importance of detachment and vairagya, very little things, work. He's the head of the ashram and we are doing the work. But he always told us it's not the work that's important, it's what you learn from it. He would say in Bengali, Tomar ki holo, what did you gain out of the work? Whether it's done well or not done well, that's secondary. His attention to detail, most of all, his attention to sadhu life. He trained us to be, at least to want to be good sadhus. So the work was secondary, being a scholar was secondary. All those things came later, but being a good sadhu. We saw Swami Pavananandaji, Shambhu Maharaj, who was an Irishman. He was a Western monk who lived all his life in India till the very end of his life. He was in Deoghar when I joined, a disciple of Swami Shivanandaji. Unforgettable for me. I mean, he was nearly 90 when I first saw him. Graceful, I mean, deeply spiritual. So many little incidents I could say. For example, I was a bookworm always. So once, and he had a nice collection of Christian mysticism. So I would go for the most difficult book. So I saw those books and I picked out the Dark Night of the Soul. No, the Cloud of Unknowing. The Cloud of Unknowing. I picked that out. And he was watching from behind me, and he swooped in and he picked it out from my hand, and he said, "This is later. First this." And he put the book which Deepak Maharaj referred to, Practice of the Presence of God, Brother Lawrence. So like that, teaching us at every little, turn of our monastic life. And their blessings are, I think, the greatest resource that I have. The memories of those first few years in Deoghar, and the advice, the love, the scoldings that we received from the senior monks, they are our treasure. I mean, it's something, when I look back now and think about it, it's one of the most precious things that I have in life.
Wow. Thank you so much, Swamiji. Thank you. And Swami Chidekananda.
Okay. I think that I'll take your question in reverse. And you said what Swami has inspired you in your spiritual life to become a monk. So actually, I'll take that question, that what Swami has actually helped me in my pre-monastic life, to help attain some success in my pre-monastic life, which then helped me to become a monk. And I think that's a little bit practical, because many people listening, they face their own problems, especially young people with ambitions. So I remember when before I joined, I grew up in a devotees family. So we had the fortune to have association with many great monks. Swami Asheshananda, I could serve him. Prabhupada, Swami Tathagathanandaji, as Swami Sarvapriyananda Maharaj mentioned, Swami Suhitanandaji, and of course Swami Swahanandaji, my guru. So As you mentioned last time, before joining, I was working as an assistant district attorney for the city of San Francisco. And I was a hardcore, of course, Advaita Vedantist, and I wanted to try to put these teachings that we got into practice as an assistant district attorney. And I remember that when the first day on the job, actually it was such a tremendous amount of pressure. And you felt off balance. And you see, especially for the young people, the young attorneys, you're expected to get convictions right off the bat with a set of bad facts, meaning facts that are not in your favor. And where I was working, that was like a springboard to become something, a governor, a presidential candidate. So many conflicting emotions and views were there. And I remember, like, I had the good fortune to have intimate contact with of course, with Swami Swahanandaji, Pravrajika, Atmajnananda. And one thing especially about Swami Swahananda, he had this amazing ability to listen to both sides of an argument, not only not take sides, but he could empathize with both parties. He could empathize with both parties. And that helped me a lot. I remember that my first case in court, it was a domestic violence case, and I was representing the lady being domestically abused. And I was a law student at that time, and my a law professor is supposed to come with me to court and help me represent the case. She was running late that day, so she was unable to come. So we go to the district court, and I remember that when I presented that case, that was my first case in court, remembering Swami Swahanandaji, Pravrajika, and others, I could present it with a great deal of calmness and balance. And that was one thing that Swami Swahanandaji had told me from the very beginning. Don't try to convince the jury. Don't try to convince the judge. What did Swami Vivekananda say? Maya is nothing but a statement of facts. There will be good facts and there will be bad facts. You present rather than trying to convince, you present the facts in the light most favorable to your client, and then let it be. You don't have to convince. So that took a lot of the pressure off. A worry is about, okay, how am I going to convince people? No, I don't have to do any of that. I just have to present to you to the best of my ability, and of course prepare. And that helped me by all their grace. I'm just giving this as an example because many of you listening, you're actually living in the world. But this is the inspiration that I got from mixing with so many sadhus, especially Swami Swahanandaji, Pravrajika. So I say that any of you, if you can mix with some of these monks today, you get a bit of that calmness. And that's important for success, not only in monastic life, but also in worldly life.
Thank you, Swamiji, so much. And thank you, all the Swamis and Pravrajikas. Thank you so much for sharing. It's been a wonderful experience. This is something that we just, it was beyond our imagination. And taking the time to be able to come and share your knowledge, share your wisdom. I cannot tell you the number of devotees that have just been so in love with what's happening and just so grateful. The word I can say is just so grateful because you've shared so much, these beautiful presentations and your knowledge and your own experiences. You've made this really something successful, and these videos will be online for anybody to come and watch. And I think it's a great way to begin your journey in spiritual life. It's also a great way just to keep reviewing these things so you can digest them and practice them. The whole point of this is to take pieces that you feel is right for you and practice that. Practice, practice, practice. So, and I want to thank also everybody.
Sorry, Swamiji, there's one last question from Vikram Bhaskar from San Marcos. he would like to know about your inspiration, Swamiji.
Right now we don't have enough time for that. That will be for the continuation course coming in the fall. All right. But I continue to be inspired by all the monks and Pravajikas here. They continue to inspire me. Like I said, life inspires life. And so when you see them, when you meet with them, you start to get a little glimpse of what it means to be steady in action and to have love for God. So the more time you can spend with these monks, the more it will start to just, you'll start to imbibe it, osmosis, right? I want to thank all the devotees for helping and for contributing. You've made this a really wonderful experience. The questions you've given, it's been a journey. And it started, I believe, in April, and now it's come all the way here to completion. It's not the end of our journey, but it's sort of the end of this temporarily for this coursework. I do want to acknowledge Vikram, who's on the screen right now. Vikram, thank you so much. He has made all of this possible. Without the technical expertise, we would not, as you see, things have ran very smooth. And that's just because of the people hidden behind here. Also, another acknowledgement is to Monday Media. They have been putting the videos online in a very quick place. They've been editing. Just to let you know, the videos of all the classes are now up. If you go to the website, you can get to the link. Otherwise, we'll be sharing that link tomorrow of all the videos except for one, I believe. That's Swami Atmarupananda's personal transformation. That will be soon up on as well within a week or so. So if you please continue to watch these videos, please get nourishment from all of the Swamis and Pravajikas you see here. I believe they're all on YouTube. They all are giving lectures on the weekends and they have classes. So you can continue to connect with them. Again, we'll be sending 2 surveys out at the end of this tomorrow. Please fill out the surveys, and we're going to begin a new session, we hopefully in the fall, with much more structure, much more depth, and I'm sure with inspiration for you to continue on in this spiritual journey. So I'd like to end off here with having Pravrajika Vrajaprana. Vrajaprana, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay, I'd like to end off with having you close off with the chant.
Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnam Udachyate Purnasya Purnamataya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.
Thank you, everyone. And in the continuation of our journey here, if the Swamis and Pravajikas, they would love to have the darshan of the people on the screen. So if you like to just show yourself on the screen now, the Swamis, all you have to do is go to your, if you can see the widescreen, and you can just scroll down to see everybody, and you can just wave to everybody, just as a way for everybody to see you. If you go to participant view, and you can scroll down and see people from various parts of the countries all over the world. We thank everyone so much for coming. Hi, everybody. And in the words of Holy Mother, we don't say goodbye. We don't say Jachi. We say Aschi. Come again. Come again. Wonderful to see everybody. Just you can see everybody here. Thank you so much, everybody. We will see you soon.
Okay.
Thank you, Swamis Pravajikas. We'll see you soon. Jai Ma. Jai Ma.
Jai Ma. Jai Ma.